Hey again, it's Heather Freeman. I'm really excited to share Season 3 of Magic in the United States with you. The trailer comes out November 5th, and the first episode arrives November 12th. Today, I want to share with you one of my favorite episodes from a favorite podcast. The episode is called Finding Freedom in Buddhism with Angelica Ross, and the show is Second Sunday. Second Sunday is a podcast about Black queer people finding, keeping, and sometimes losing faith in the Black church. If you have questions about religion, grew up around the Black church, or want to hear perspectives from people who survived challenging moments and complicated feelings, then this is the show for you too. So now, let's hear Angelica's story from Second Sunday.
There is no place like the Cube.
Hey, I'm Darren.
And I'm Esther, and this is Second Sunday, a podcast about Black queer people finding, keeping, and sometimes losing faith.
I would always hear them chanting from his room or whatever. But when he invited me to the Buddhist Center in Los Angeles, the Friendship Center, we parked the car in the parking lot. I'm telling you, I never felt something so immediate. When I got into the space, it was from the parking lot to me getting inside the building in the room where they were chanting. It felt like I was in a scene from Avatar where I'm walking in on them all connected to that tree, Awa, and they're all doing a thing. I grew up in church almost all my life. So the Black women I met at the Buddhist Center, to me, felt free.
Darren, this season of the show is going to be really interesting because we're talking about faith and spirituality outside of the church. Now, I feel like that's a bit taboo. Do you feel free to look for faith and spirituality outside the church?
I mean, I've been through enough moments and highs and lows to know you got to get it where you can get it. And in so many ways, I think church teaches us we have the truth. And if you look for it anywhere else, or if you find truth anywhere else, that you're somehow in danger. But high key, the reality is that there's some powerful stuff all around us, and we just haven't made enough space to look and see and find where the God of the universe is showing up for us.
Black queer people have found so many different ways to look at faith and spirituality outside of the church. And I'm really excited to understand where people's different journeys have led them, how people have applied this kind of new lens of spirituality to their day-to-day lives. I'm especially excited about this episode because we're focusing on Buddhism. And in having this conversation with our guest for this episode, it made me start thinking about challenges in a different way. I think, what if we looked at challenges as a gift, like the challenge of finding your self-worth if you don't automatically get it from outside, the challenge of learning how to honor your parents, even if they don't necessarily show up the way that you need them to. In this episode, we're going to explore the challenge of being a Black woman of trans experience.
Some of us were given a theology that glorified suffering, right? It was like, oh, well, if they talking about you and if they don't treat you right, it's all for God's glory, right? But I don't think that's a fruitful or generative kind of perspective. And it's not to say that I never believed that. I even preached it at one point. But what I've come to realize is that there are different ways or different perspectives we can take for how we see what the divine, what the universe, what God is doing. And for some people, orienting it as, oh, well, God wanted you to go through this, or God set you up to go through these hardships and difficulties. I like to think of it more of how is God showing up with me, right? The Bible talking about God as the man of many sorrows, or talking about Jesus as the man of many sorrows. There are so many ways that I think the divine chooses to be with us in what's going on, and that we can change the way we hear the story when we think about it, again, from another perspective.
So the voice you just heard at the start of the episode is Angelica Ross, a groundbreaking entrepreneur, transgender rights advocate, and actress in the award-winning series Pose, where she plays ballroom baddie Candy Ferocity. She grew up in the 80s, attending a Church of God in Christ in Racine, Wisconsin, of all places.
Huh? There's Black people in Racine, Wisconsin? Yes, baby. First of all, there's Black people everywhere, and I need us to get to that understanding, and that there is no place where Blackness does not exist, number one.
She's also been practicing Buddhism for 13 years, and her journey to Buddhism actually came partially as a result of a breakup, which is where a lot of journeys begin, if we're being honest. But this wasn't just any breakup. This was a breakup from what seemed like a perfect relationship. Darren, it's funny to me that even though we, as people who are, in the alphabet family, seem to be so far outside of the margins of quote unquote mainstream society in the way that we love and express ourselves and couple, we still emulate heteronormative culture in so many ways in our relationships. And this is one of those stories.
He was everything that my mom wanted for us, in the sense of either be a doctor or marry a doctor. And I was on the road to marrying one. I had the engagement ring and everything, but I gave the ring back and I broke off the engagement because I realized that I could never reach my full potential living in his shadow. It was only going well as long as people didn't know I was trans. When I left my ex and left everything and started my life over,
we coming from Chicago.
First, I went to Chicago and I did drag for a while, whatever. But when I finally decided I did not want to lip sync, I wanted to learn how to use my own voice. That's what started me not only singing, but speaking up. And so when I moved to California, had nothing, I was living in a motel, didn't even have a job yet. It was the same motel they filmed Pretty Woman in too, and I answered a Craigslist ad for a roommate, and that roommate was a Buddhist, and that roommate eventually introduced me to Buddhism. Once I got into the home, I set my bags down, I closed the door, and I mourned my relationship. I was depressed for a really long time. I was hurt. And my roommate kept inviting me to come chant with them. And I was just like, yes, I've been reading Buddhism and I think I like it, but just another time. No. And I think that probably was another barrier for me in the sense of, that's for y'all. I would always hear them chanting from his room or whatever. But when he invited me to the Buddhist Center in Los Angeles, the Friendship Center, we parked the car in the parking lot. I'm telling you, I never felt something so immediate. When I got into the space, it was from the parking lot to me getting inside the building in the room where they were chanting. It felt like I was in a scene from Avatar, where I'm walking in on them all connected to that tree, Awa, and they're all doing a thing. And it immediately felt right. And I didn't know nothing. I didn't know what this was. I didn't know nothing. What I loved about the practice is even as I was chanting words and learning words that I knew nothing about, the real meaning of them manifested, regardless of my true knowledge in it. And as my knowledge actually grew out of it and studied it, holy moly, because I'm trying to tell you, the Black people that I met at these Buddhist centers, to me, and I'm just putting this out there as my experience, The Black people at that Buddhist center, I grew up in church. I grew up in church almost all my life. So the Black women I met at the Buddhist center, to me, felt free. I did feel this immediate connection, right? But I also felt this buzzing anxiety underneath, because here I'm coming into a space, I'm trans. I know that always results in some kind of conversation, some kind of explanation, some kind of, well, something. And I'm telling you, to have the response from a community of people when you tell them that I'm trans, and even if they don't know, they're whatever, had different beliefs before, anything, if they've been practicing in that practice for 2 months to 20 years, they immediately pull back and look at me and smile and say, congratulations. With every person, being, identity comes challenge. And we believe on the other side of challenge is strength, is wisdom, is clarity, is blessing, is a benefit on these challenges. So whenever we have anything really challenging in life, I lost a job, something happened or whatever, they say congratulations, And so for them to say congratulations to me is to congratulate me on the blessing that is the challenge of my life. It is the cross that I pick up and walk with. You understand what I'm saying? That will be a blessing onto me and onto others. There's a profound deepness. It's the way that I practice and why I practice and all the things is because we say that one phrase or passage is like a ship to cross the sea of suffering. And we say that because just one thing, one of these things unlocks such a piece of your mind that it adds an element of freedom to your life. There's more to be had that adds this element of freedom. And so, as someone who's been practicing now for 13 years, the depth at which the blessings that I receive from this practice is immeasurable.
Darren, you and I have talked about suffering a lot in this podcast, and we've often had to push back on this idea that long suffering is a positive thing because it's so often used to excuse abuse. How do you see the differences between this idea that's ingrained in us that long suffering means that you don't speak up against oppression? What's the difference in your mind between that and this idea of challenge as a blessing?
So when Angelica was talking, I thought a lot about both the places where I have experienced suffering as abuse and the places where I've been kind of liberated and the places where I feel strengthened. I often call them my bittersweet stories of both, this should never have happened, and I wouldn't be the person that I am without it happening. I think that's kind of what she's describing, how we get unlocked. We find things that are true about ourselves. I keep saying this phrase, God's working all things together for good in these moments.
So Darren, one of the things that really struck me, even though I've grown up in the church and we have this whole thing about honoring your father and your mother, Angelica introduced me in this conversation to this concept of the debt of gratitude.
We call it the mystic law and all these different things because it just does what needs to be done. And as long as you show up, as long as you keep showing up, that's all that is required, is that you show up in front of the mirror. That's it. And that you look at yourself clearly without filters, without whatever, and that you polish that mirror so you can see through the dust, so you can see yourself and other people clearly.
And this concept is a really big deal in Angelica's life because growing up in Racine, Wisconsin, it wasn't really the easiest thing in the world for a Black trans kid with a very religious family, specifically a very religious mother. Things were really tough, but they got even tougher when Angelica started to transition.
So about the time that I left the military when I was 19 is when I started to transition. And as I started to transition, that's when my relationship with my mother really kicked into high gear of discord and disrespect.
Things are tough with Angelica's mom, but the relationship really comes to a breaking point when her mother gives her an ultimatum, demanding that one of them takes their own life.
My mom asking me to take my own life is basically in essence of a space where we understand that having an ultimatum like that, you take your life or I'm gonna take mine, is a space where you're telling me you do not value me or my life as is. That as is, my life does not have value. So initially, I was not trying to hear that disrespect. And so I was in a position where I started to be disrespectful to my mother. And, and I remember having a conversation, sort of argument, three-way argument with my mom and my dad on the phone. And my dad's like, one thing you will not do. I understand your mom is wrong and doing these things or whatever, but one thing you will not do is disrespect your mother. And it's odd because as someone who has had such a rejection of authority because of the way my parents have disowned me when I first came out and all the different things or whatever, I still felt the conviction of what he said there.
So instead, she chose to walk away from her mother and the faith she'd been raised in. Angelica says she felt spiritually homeless until the day she found Buddhism.
We went through a period of about 10 years of not speaking to each other.
This Buddhist practice of being grateful to her parents led Angelica to reflect on her mom's journey and what she'd been through in life, and find a way to empathize with her. So because of her faith, she reaches back out to her mother, and that is how they both end up on Oprah Winfrey's stage in 2019. Listen to this clip.
My religion was very, very strict. I'm talking about strict. We're not allowed to wear pants. You can't wear makeup. You can't go to movies. You can't, just strict. And so when Angelica came out to me, it was devastating, and I couldn't work. I ended up seeing a psychologist. I was on Zoloft. I was on, I had medication because I just couldn't take it. And I did tell her, I said, you need to kill yourself or I'm going to kill myself. It's always preached, you're going to hell. You're going to hell for this, you're going to hell for that. I wasn't knowledgeable. I didn't know. And I hate that I missed so many years out of her life.
When I was able to see that she had her own journey, and that along that journey she had a baby, and that somehow she made it through the journey with the baby alive and intact, through patriarchal violence, through family disdain, and through judgment, and through all of these things. And when I tell you, regardless of her ignorance, regardless of any of those things, I am so grateful. I don't judge her not one single bit. The freedom that has come in my practice is that it has removed all judgment for her. What I know is that my mom is a woman, and a Black woman in the United States in a patriarchal, racist environment. And so the fact that she got some things wrong, I can see why. I can see how. It is what it is. And so as an adult, I move forward in power in the sense of knowing that her mistakes have no burden or control over my life today, and that I have every bit of power and ability to do something different, to shift the wave of energy. And when I tell you, many people, when they see the video on Oprah Winfrey's network of my mother standing up in front of 100 Black women and saying, I didn't know any better. And that I told my own child to kill themselves, and I would have regretted if that would have happened. And that I knew that I had to change or else I was going to lose my child. And so hear me when I'm telling you, when I told my mother that her purpose would be tied to mine and that she would now be standing on a stage where we know that there are Black mothers around the world who are still trying to reconcile their faith with their relationship with their children. So not only that, but then you have to think about then my role in Pose. So to see profound purpose go across intersection and industry to communicate from the personal to the political, from the individual to the collective, that our problems are our problems and challenges to deal with, but they're also ours to deal with so that we can move into the collective healed.
You know, we have this conversation all the time, but I don't know if we necessarily fully embody it. We always say that our parents are human beings, but I don't know if we necessarily really embody what it means to see others as human. And the inconvenient part of that is that they are on a journey of their own and that they come to realizations in their own time and that they can grow. So as taboo as it is for Angelica and the way that she was raised in the Church of God in Christ to seek spirituality outside of the Black church, that actually helped her forgive and accept her mom without judgment. And then it made me think in my head about the ways that I have been judging and holding on to people who have hurt me. And it's not to say that those people are excused from the hurt that they caused, but oftentimes I think subconsciously we could hold on to those people and see them as stagnant. And there's a freedom in just stepping away from people, both for yourself and for them, so that they can just go through what they need to go through. And then also in stepping away through this conversation and hearing Angelica's story, I'm hearing that removing your responsibility from how people choose to go through their journey also creates room for you to look inside yourself and heal yourself and face the demons that you have to face through those challenges. And honestly, really, to me, it says, Darren, that you don't realize the ways that you don't love yourself until you stop trying to figure out why other people don't love you.
In addition to us figuring out how to, take care of ourselves and distance ourselves, I love that Angelica brought out this important piece of being able to see herself and others. To say trans women aren't your enemy, we're your sisters, to make this interconnected and related, and to see how the impact of the grandmother impacts the mother, impacts her. No matter how much you want to point blame or no matter what systems of oppression exist, we are all being oppressed together. And therefore, there's something powerful to be said about how we find that empathy, or we find that ability to see a person, like you said, as human. And then from that place, realize I had to go through my own journey. And that person also has to go through their own journey, because we're all living in a world that doesn't make it okay for any of us.
So my Buddhist practice with my community, which is the Soka Gakkai International, the SGI, we practice Nichiren Buddhism. And so the Soka Gakkai was created a long time ago by President Tsunasaburo Makaguchi, who created it as the Value Creation Society. That's what the Soka Gakkai means, the Value Creation Society. And so the whole purpose was in understanding that every child would come to an understanding, an unshakable understanding of their value. Because I believe that when someone does not value their lives, all other problems can arise from that point alone. The world I want to see, the things I want to see, is places where we can evolve beyond capitalism being the dominant force, where we learn other forms of exchange and valuing each other, and where we are able to make very conscious decisions about where we place our value, who we align our value with, and are very understanding of what that is, and not tricked into being in places we don't want to be in because we don't understand that. So I think when I see that, the world, that's what I love about not defining, oh, I want to see this, this, and this. No, if I know I see this element in the space, then I know so many other things are going to be beautiful.
The Second Sunday podcast is hosted by Esther and Darren Calhoun. But podcasting is a team sport, so a big thank you to our dream team.
Our producers, Esther Ikoro, Anna Deshawn, and Nicole Hill. Our associate producer, Amber Walker.
Our sound designer, Florence Burrow-Adams, and our managing producers, Jocelyn Gonzalez and Courtney Florentine. We also want to thank the SGI Atlanta Buddhist Center for contributing to this episode.
Our opening theme song is Maya B's original track titled They Don't Know. You should download the full song today.
To learn more about today's guests or the show, visit our show notes on our website, secondsundaypod.com, and on Instagram @secondsundaypod. Second Sunday is a production of The Cube, spelled with a Q, in partnership with the PRX Big Questions Project, which is generously supported by the John Templeton Foundation and produced by PRX Productions.
The Cube is your #1 curated platform to discover the best BIPOC and QTPOC podcasts.
Support this show and more like it by joining the Cube app and follow the Cube across social media @the Cube app.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next episode.